The boutique in Kolonaki was a temple of white marble and gold accents, and my sister Callista was its goddess. The dress she was being fitted for cost more than my car. It was a magnificent creation of silk and lace that flowed around her like sea foam. As the maid of honor, my job was to kneel at her feet and make sure the train lay perfectly. My knees ached on the cold floor, but I smiled because this was Callista's moment. Then a sharp, searing pain shot through my calf. Gasp looking down. A long pin, carelessly left by the seamstress, had buried itself in my leg. I pulled it out, and a dark bead of blood immediately welled up, followed by another and another. It dripped from my finger onto the pristine marble. "Oh, for goodness sake, Lyra, can you not be so dramatic?" Callista's voice was sharp, annoyed. She didn't look at my leg. She looked at the drop of blood on the floor. "You're getting blood everywhere." My mother, Despina, rushed over, not with a first aid kit, but with a single useless tissue. "Here, press it on tightly," she ordered, her eyes darting nervously toward the boutique owner. They fussed over the floor while I pressed the flimsy paper against the wound, feeling the blood soak through instantly. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The fitting continued. They pinned and tucked while I knelt in a growing haze of pain, my leg throbbing with a life of its own. When they were finally done, Callista admired herself in the mirror, radiant and perfect. She turned to us, beaming. "Okay, let's go. Our reservation is in 20 minutes. She glanced at me, finally acknowledging my injury. "Just get a taxi to a clinic or something. We can't be late." And just like that, they walked out the door, my sister and my mother, their laughter echoing in the silent white room. They left me there, alone, bleeding on the floor of the gilded cage. Can you believe they just left me there? My own family. I'm dying to know what you guys would have done in my situation, so drop a comment below. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. The taxi ride was a blur of Athens traffic and sharp stabbing pains. I found a small medical clinic tucked away on a side street. The doctor was a kind, older man with a gentle touch. He cleaned the wound and his brow furrowed. "You are very lucky," he said, looking up at me over his glasses. "A few centimeters to the side and this pin would have hit an artery. You can't leave a deep puncture wound like this. The risk of infection is very high." He gave me 5 stitches, his movements swift and professional. I paid the bill, my hands trembling slightly, and sat on the steps outside the clinic, the city's afternoon chaos swirling around me. I felt so incredibly alone. I pulled out my phone, thinking I should at least text them to let them know I was okay. But the first thing I saw when I unlocked the screen was a new Instagram post. It was from Callista. The photo was bright and perfect. There she was, alongside our mother and her fiancé, Andreas. They were clinking champagne glasses on a sun-drenched rooftop, the ancient Acropolis standing proudly in the background. Their smiles were wide and carefree. My eyes stung as I read the caption, each word a tiny sharp jab to my heart. Celebrating the perfect day with the perfect family. Some small dramas, but nothing can ruin this moment. #Santorini wedding #blessed. Some small dramas. She was talking about me. My wound, the stitches, the pain. It was all just a small drama. She could brush aside for a champagne toast and a perfect picture. I stared at their smiling faces, at the world they lived in where my pain was nothing more than an inconvenient footnote. A cold, hard feeling began to settle in my chest, replacing the shock and the hurt. It was the heavy, solid weight of understanding. This wasn't just a mistake. This was who they were. I unlocked the door to my small apartment, a space that felt more like a sanctuary than ever before. The familiar scent of clay and drying glazes from my ceramic studio filled the air, a comforting contrast to the sterile clinic and the fake perfection of Callista's world. My stitched leg throbbed with every step, a constant reminder of the afternoon's cruelty. I ignored the urge to collapse onto my sofa and instead went straight to my laptop. I sat down at my cluttered work desk, clay dust covering almost every surface, and logged into my bank account. But it wasn't my personal account I was interested in. I clicked on a different tab, one I managed but rarely touched. The screen loaded, displaying the words, Helen Vetta's Family Trust. My grandmother, my Yaya Helen, had left the account in my sole care. It wasn't a fortune, but it was significant. It held exactly 24,000 euros. Her will was very specific. The money was to be used for a truly significant family milestone, something that would strengthen the family and honor its legacy. A month ago, after weeks of pressure from Callista and my mother, I had reluctantly agreed that Callista's wedding qualified. I had transferred the entire amount into a new joint account with her, set up specifically for the wedding vendors. The money was meant for the venue, the caterers, the flowers, the very foundations of her dream Santorini wedding. Now, as I stared at the joint account statement on the screen, seeing that 24,000 euros sitting there, ready to be spent, my promise to my Yaya felt like a lie. I wasn't funding a significant milestone. I was funding the celebration of a person who would leave her own sister bleeding for the sake of a lunch reservation. This wasn't strengthening the family. This was rewarding cruelty. This was a betrayal of my grandmother's trust. As I sat there staring at the screen, the memory came rushing back, as clear and sharp as the day it happened. It was a week before my Yaya passed away. The scent of lavender and old books filled her room. The sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. She was frail, tucked beneath a mountain of blankets, but her eyes were as piercing and intelligent as ever. She had gripped my hand, her skin as soft and thin as paper. Her voice was a whisper, but it was filled with a strength that defied her weakness. "They see money, Lyra," she had said, her gaze fixed on mine. I knew exactly who she meant. Callista and Despina. They see price tags and status. They see things that shine. She squeezed my hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "But you, my girl, you see value. You see the heart of things. That is why you must be the gatekeeper." Her words had felt so heavy then, a responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. I was just the quiet one, the artist, not the one who made big family decisions. But Yaya had seen something in me. "Protect our family's heart, not just its wallet," she'd finished, her eyes pleading with me to understand the difference. Now, sitting in my studio, the throbbing in my leg a dull echo of her warning, I finally understood. My Yaya hadn't wanted me to just sign a check. She had trusted me to use her legacy with wisdom and integrity. She wanted me to fund love, to support loyalty, to build the family up. She never would have wanted her hard-earned money to be used to reward the casual, thoughtless cruelty I had experienced today. This wasn't about the money. This was about protecting the very heart of our family that she had entrusted to me. Her warning was no longer a memory. It was a command. My Yaya's voice was a clear, steady echo in my mind. Protect our family's heart. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the decision already made. The hurt from the boutique, the sting of the Instagram post, and the weight of my grandmother's words all came together, creating a moment of perfect, cold clarity. I opened the banking portal. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a strange sense of calm, like a ship finding its course in a storm. I navigated to the joint account, the one holding the wedding funds. The balance stared back at me. 24,000 euros. It looked like a price tag for my silence, for my acceptance of their behavior. I found the transfer option. My destination account was already saved. The Helen Vetta's Family Trust. The secure, long-term account that started all of this. The account that, by its own rules, required a formal 30-day legal review process for any withdrawals. Once the money went back in, it wouldn't be coming out again anytime soon. I typed in the full amount. 24,000 euros. The cursor blinked on the confirm transfer button. I thought of Callista's dismissive tone, my mother's anxious face, the champagne glasses raised in a toast while I was getting stitches. I thought of my Yaya's trusting eyes. Then I clicked. The screen refreshed, showing a confirmation number and a zero balance in the joint account. A small notification popped up at the bottom of the screen. An automated email receipt has been sent to all account holders. That meant Callista just received an email telling her that her entire wedding fund had vanished. A second later, as if on cue, my phone lit up, vibrating violently against the wooden desk. The screen glowed with a single name, stark and demanding. Callista. The war had just begun. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering, taking a deep breath and centering myself. I knew what was coming. I was not wrong. The sound that erupted from the speaker was not my sister's voice. It was pure, unfiltered rage. "What did you do?" she shrieked, her voice so high-pitched it was almost a whistle. "The deposit for the venue, Lyra. The Santorini venue. It was just declined. The money is gone." I could hear her pacing, the sound of her expensive heels clicking angrily on what I imagined was a polished floor. I stood up and walked over to my pottery wheel, trailing my fingers over a half-finished vase. I kept my own voice calm, level and cool. "You left me bleeding on a floor for a lunch reservation," I said simply, the words falling like stones into the chaotic silence on her end of the line. "The Bank of Yaya Helen is officially closed for business." For a full second, there was nothing but stunned silence. I had never spoken to her like this before. I was always the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. The silence was quickly replaced by disbelief, then a new wave of fury. "You're going to ruin my life over a scratch," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "A tiny little scratch. Are you insane?" "It wasn't a scratch, Callista," I replied, my voice still quiet. "It was 5 stitches. And you didn't even care enough to wait. You cared more about champagne. This is my wedding. The most important day of my life," she screamed. "And you're destroying it because you're jealous. You've always been jealous of me." Before I could respond to the ridiculous accusation, the line went dead. She had hung up. I knew this was far from over. This was just the first shot fired. She wouldn't fight this battle alone. She would go and get her generals. I didn't have to wait long. An hour later, there was a loud, aggressive pounding on my apartment door. It wasn't a polite knock. It was a demand. I opened it to find both my parents standing in the hallway, their faces grim. My mother, Despina, pushed past me into the room, her eyes blazing. My father, Nikos, followed behind her, his expression a mixture of disappointment and weary resignation. "How could you?" Despina began, her voice low and dangerous. "How could you be so cruel, so selfish? After everything we have done for your sister." "I did what I thought was right," I said, closing the door and leaning against it. "I would not let them intimidate me in my own home." "Right," she scoffed, throwing her hands up in the air. "You have humiliated this family. Callista is hysterical. You've ruined her wedding because of your petty jealousy." I looked at my father, hoping for some sign of support, but he just stared at the floor, refusing to meet my eyes. "Did she tell you what happened, Dad?" I asked quietly. "Did she tell you that she and Mom left me at the boutique after I was injured?" "She said you had a small accident," my mother cut in. "Your sister is under a lot of pressure, Lyra. Planning a wedding of this size is stressful. You, of all people, should understand the meaning of sacrifice for family." Sacrifice. The word hung in the air between us. My entire life had been a sacrifice for Callista's happiness, for their peace. I was always the one who was expected to understand, to forgive, to forget. "My leg has 5 stitches in it, Mom," I said, my voice hardening. "And my sacrifice was supposed to be for a significant family milestone, not to reward someone who treats me like I'm disposable." "Reverse the transfer, Lyra." My father finally spoke, his voice heavy. "Do it now. End this foolishness." I shook my head slowly. "No," I said. "I can't." My mother stared at me, her face contorted in disbelief. "Then you are no longer our daughter," she whispered. My parents left, slamming the door behind them, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was the adrenaline of a battle finally fought. My phone buzzed, and I saw it was my cousin, Theron. I was relieved to see his name. He was the one person in my family who lived in the real world. I heard there was a Vetta's family explosion, he said, skipping any pleasantries. Are you okay? I'm fine, I said, sinking onto my sofa. But I think I just blew up a wedding. Theron chuckled. I heard. Callista called our aunt, crying about how you stole her money. I figured there was more to the story. As I was explaining the whole ugly incident to him, my laptop chimed with the sound of a new email. I put Theron on speaker and went to look. The email was from a man named Mr. Giannakos, the head of the Santorini wedding consortium. My sister Callista was copied on the email. My eyes scanned the formal text, my breath catching in my throat. What is it? Theron asked, hearing my silence. It's from the Santorini wedding planner, I said, reading the words aloud. Dear Ms. Vettas, due to the failed payment and subsequent breach of contract for deposit invoice number 743, we regret to inform you that your entire wedding package for the date of September 28th has been cancelled. This includes the Caldera View venue, catering services, musical accompaniment, and floral arrangements. As per our waiting list policy, this highly sought-after date is now being offered to the next couple in line. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. There was a low whistle from the phone. Wow, Theron said. You didn't just take back the money. You just erased her entire wedding with one click. The finality of it hit me. This wasn't just a postponed payment. The Santorini domino had fallen, and it had taken everything down with it. You know, Theron said, his voice turning more serious after I finished reading the email. I've been a little worried about Andreas for a while. I frowned. Why? He's always seemed charming. That was the right word for him. Andreas was almost too charming, too smooth. He had a perfect smile and a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. That's the problem, Theron said, echoing my thoughts. A few months ago, just for fun, I did a little digging on his booming shipping business. You know me, I like to poke around online. Theron was a genius with computers. He worked in cybersecurity and could find out almost anything about anyone. His company has a tiny digital footprint, Lyra. Almost nothing. No real website, no press, no client reviews. It's strange for a business he claims is so successful. I thought about the expensive watch Andreas wore, the way he always insisted on paying for extravagant family dinners. I found some public records too, Theron continued. 2 of his previous companies went bankrupt. They left a bunch of investors high and dry, and he just walked away and started something new. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Why didn't you say anything? What was I going to say? Callista is blinded by him, and your parents think he's a god because he has money. They wouldn't have listened, he said. He was right. Any criticism of Andreas was seen as jealousy. Listen, Theron said, his voice low. I have a feeling that 24,000 euros was for more than just flowers and a nice view. Let me do a proper search this time. No more casual poking around. Let me really look into his finances. I have a feeling we're about to find out what this wedding is really about. I agreed immediately, a new sense of dread creeping over me. The cancelled wedding was just the beginning. I was standing on the edge of a much deeper, darker hole. The next morning, an email with a very official-looking header appeared in my inbox. It was from one of the most powerful and expensive law firms in Athens. My stomach twisted as I opened it. The document was a formal cease and desist letter, and it was from Andreas. His name was typed at the bottom, representing his supposedly successful shipping company. The legal language was dense and intimidating, full of phrases designed to scare me. It accused me of tortious interference, for causing the wedding to be cancelled, and intentional infliction of emotional distress on my sister. I had to read that line twice. He was accusing me of causing emotional distress after what they had done. The letter demanded the immediate release of the trust funds. If I failed to comply within 24 hours, it stated, they would file a lawsuit against me. A lawsuit that would not only seek the 24,000 euros but also additional damages for the irreparable harm I had caused to their reputation. Then came the part that was meant to be the final blow, the personal jab designed to make me feel small and powerless. It threatened a lawsuit that would financially ruin me and what the letter mockingly referred to as my little pottery hobby. My little pottery hobby. The business I had built from scratch. The studio that was my sanctuary, my passion, and my livelihood. The place where I created things of value and beauty with my own two hands. He was trying to dismiss my entire life's work as insignificant, a silly little pastime. He thought he could bully me, that he could wave his fancy lawyers in my face and I would crumble. But he had made a critical mistake. He hadn't just threatened my money. He had insulted my work, my passion, my very identity. And in doing so, he hadn't scared me. He had just made me very, very angry. I was still fuming over the lawyer's email when my phone rang. It was Theron. His voice was different. The playful tone was gone, replaced by a tense urgency. "Lyra, are you sitting down?" he asked. "I found it. And it's worse than we thought." I sat on the edge of my workbench, bracing myself. "What is it?" "Andreas's company isn't just struggling, it's a house of cards," he said. "It's leveraged to the hilt. He has taken out massive loans to maintain this image of success." Theron took a deep breath. "He owes a huge debt to a private lender in Piraeus. Not a bank, Lyra. Loan shark. The kind of person you do not want to owe money to. And the full payment, the final payment, is due next week. The week right after the wedding was supposed to happen." Everything suddenly clicked into place. The lavish dinners, the designer clothes, the desperate need for the wedding to be perfect. "The wedding wasn't a celebration," I whispered, the realization dawning on me. "It was a show." "Exactly," Theron confirmed. "It was a performance." He was using the wedding to look successful and stable, trying to convince the lender to give him an extension. And our family name was his co-star. He was using the Vetta's name to give himself credibility. Then Theron delivered the final, sickening blow. The 24,000 euros from Yaya's trust. It was never going to Mr. Giannacco's in Santorini. I traced the payment schedule he set up. The money was intended to be a last-minute, desperate payment to the lender. Not for the full amount, but just to pay off the interest, to buy himself another few weeks of time. Felt sick. My grandmother's legacy, the money meant to celebrate family and love, was going to be used as a payoff to a loan shark. My sister's dream wedding was nothing but a cover for her fiancé's lies. And I was the one who was supposed to fund the entire disgusting charade. 2 days later, Callista appeared at the door of my studio. She looked completely different from the screaming woman on the phone. Her face was pale, her eyes were red and swollen, and she wasn't wearing her usual designer clothes. She looked broken. "Lyra," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. She walked into the studio, looking around at the bags of clay and shelves of pottery as if seeing them for the first time. She wrung her hands, not meeting my eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears beginning to stream down her cheeks. "I was a monster. The stress of the wedding, it got to me. I wasn't thinking. I never should have left you like that. It was a horrible thing to do." A part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime protecting my older sister, wanted to believe her. I saw a flicker of the girl I used to build forts with, the one who used to tell me stories before we fell asleep. My anger began to soften, just a little. "It was horrible, Callista," I agreed, my voice gentle. She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I promise." She took a shaky breath, and for a moment I thought we were having a real breakthrough. But then she made her fatal mistake. She looked up, her eyes pleading. "If you could just release the funds for the venue," she sobbed. "Just that one payment. Mr. Giannacco's said he hasn't given the date away yet. He said if we pay today he might give it back to us. That's the most important thing, right? Fixing this." And there it was. My hope shattered into a million pieces. It was never about me. It was never about her apology. It was all about the money. It was about saving the wedding, saving the image. She wasn't sorry for hurting me, she was sorry she got caught. I stared at her, my face hardening again. The most important thing? Asked, my voice cold. No, Callista. It's not. The day after Callista's pathetic apology, I received a phone call from an unknown number with a Crete area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was rough, weathered by sea and sun. Am I speaking to Lyra Vetas? The man asked. The sister of Callista Vetas. Yes, this is she, I said cautiously. My name is Captain Valerios, he said. I own a charter yacht in Chania. I'm calling because I heard through the grapevine about a cancelled Vetas wedding in Santorini. The world of event vendors in the Greek islands is very small. He paused, and I could hear the sound of waves in the background. Your sister's fiancé, Andreas, hired me 6 months ago. He chartered my largest yacht for what he called a promotional event, for his shipping company. He brought potential investors on board, served them expensive champagne, and promised them the world. I gripped the phone tighter. Let me guess, I said. He never paid you. Not a single euro, Captain Valerios confirmed, his voice laced with anger. He gave me a check that bounced, and then he disappeared. Always had an excuse. The payment was processing, the bank made an error. It was always someone else's fault. The captain's story was another piece of the puzzle, confirming everything Theron and I suspected. Andreas was a professional con artist. I am calling you to warn you, miss, the captain continued. This man is dangerous. He uses big promises and important family names like yours to scam honest, hard-working people. He charms everyone, makes them trust him, and then he vanishes with their money. The wedding was likely his biggest scam yet. Be careful. He will not give up on that money easily. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. This was bigger than a family feud. Andreas wasn't just breaking my sister's heart. He was destroying lives. And he was using my family's name to do it. My parents' punishment was swift and petty. A week after my confrontation with Callista, I received a formal letter from their lawyer. They were officially removing my access to the accounts of our small family olive grove. For years I had been the one managing it. Our grove was old and had been struggling before I stepped in. I had spent countless hours building a website, finding new international buyers for our oil, and modernizing the production process. I had turned it from a barely breaking-even hobby for my father into a small but respectable source of income for them. They knew how much the grove meant to me. It was my connection to our ancestors, to the land itself. Their letter was a clear message. Fall in line or we will take away something you love. They thought that by cutting me off from the grove's income, they could squeeze me. They believed I was dependent on that money, that I would come crawling back, begging for forgiveness and ready to release the trust fund. It was a classic move from their playbook. Control and manipulation. What they didn't know was that they were years behind the times. They still saw me as the little girl with a pottery hobby. They had no idea that my ceramic studio had quietly become a success. Over the last 2 years, I had secured contracts with several high-end Athenian restaurants and boutique hotels. I had a thriving online shop. My art, the thing they dismissed as a silly pastime, was now making me more money than the olive grove ever had. Their attempt to hurt me financially was a complete failure. All they had done was reveal their own ignorance about my life. They had tried to take away my power, not realizing that I had spent years building my own, far away from their influence and control. Their punishment wasn't a blow. It was a gift. It was the final confirmation that I had made the right choice to stand on my own. That evening Theron called me. His voice was grim. Lyra, I found something. I think you need to see this right away. He sent me a link to a secure encrypted file. I managed to get access to Andreas's cloud server. Don't ask how, he said. It's probably better you don't know. Just open the folder labeled Santorini Plans. My hand trembled as I clicked on the folder. It was filled with files, but one stood out, a long email chain between Andreas and Callista. The date on the first email was from over a month ago, long before the incident at the boutique. I opened it and began to read. My blood ran cold. The first email was from Andreas. In it, he laid out his entire desperate situation in plain detail. He explained the loan shark, the massive debt, and the imminent deadline. Then he outlined a plan. A cruel, calculated plan to use the gullible sister's inheritance, as he called it, to solve his problem. He wrote about how easy it would be to manipulate me, how my love for the family would make me do anything they asked. He described the joint account as the perfect way to get the money without raising suspicion. I felt a wave of nausea, but I forced myself to keep reading. I had to see her reply. I scrolled down, my heart pounding in my chest. And there it was. Callista's response. It was short, chilling, and left no room for doubt. It read, "Do whatever you have to. I don't care about the details. Just make sure I get my Santorini wedding." She knew. She knew all of it. She knew he was a con man. She knew the money was for a loan shark. She knew the entire thing was a lie. And she didn't care. She was a willing accomplice. My sister, the person I had spent my life defending, had actively plotted to steal our grandmother's legacy and use me as a pawn in her fiancé's disgusting scheme, all for the sake of a party. The last bit of sisterly love in my heart withered and died. The emails changed everything. The hurt I felt before was a dull ache. This was a sharp, burning fire. This was no longer a family dispute. It was a calculated fraud, and my sister was at the heart of it. I would not be their victim. I would not let them get away with this. My sadness morphed into a cold, clear-eyed fury. I was done defending myself. It was time to attack. The first call I made was to Captain Valerios in Crete. I told him I had concrete proof of Andreas's fraudulent activities and asked if he would be willing to provide a formal statement. He agreed without a moment's hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop that snake," he growled. Next, using the information from Andreas's files, Theron and I found 2 other small business owners he had scammed. A caterer in Mykonos he had paid with a bounce check, and a graphic designer in Athens who had designed his fake company's logo and had never been paid. Called them both. Their stories were heartbreakingly similar to the captain's. They were relieved and angry, and both eagerly agreed to join our cause. That night, I created a shared online document with Theron. We called it the Andreas dossier. We uploaded everything. The damning email chain between Callista and Andreas, the evidence of his failed businesses, his bounce checks, the official complaints filed by his past investors, and the signed notarized statements from Captain Valerios and the other 2 vendors. We compiled a clear, undeniable timeline of his lies. Each piece of evidence was a brick, and we were building a prison wall around him. Looking at the completed file, a compilation of deceit and broken promises, I realized what I was doing. I was no longer just the gatekeeper of my Yaya's trust. I was the leader of a coalition of the scammed, a small army of honest people fighting back against a predator. And we were going to war. It was time to take the fight out of the shadows and into the open. Andreas thrived on his public image, his carefully crafted illusion of success. So that's where I would hit him first. Theron, my loyal spy, found out that Andreas had a lunch meeting scheduled the next day with a potential new investor at a popular high-end cafe in Plaka. The place would be packed with the kind of people whose opinions mattered to Andreas. It was the perfect stage. The next day, I dressed carefully, not in my usual clay-splattered work clothes, but in a smart, professional dress. I wanted to look like his equal, not his victim. I walked into the bustling cafe and saw him immediately. He was at a prime table, laughing and pouring sparkling water for a well-dressed older gentleman. He was in his element, oozing charm and confidence. I waited until their main courses arrived. Then I walked over to their table. I stood there silently until Andreas, sensing my presence, looked up. The charming smile on his face froze, replaced by a flicker of panic. "Lyra," he said through gritted teeth. "What a surprise. This is a private meeting. I'm sure it is, I said, my voice calm and pleasant. I turned to the older gentleman and extended my hand. Hello, I'm Lyra Vetas. I do apologize for the interruption. The man shook my hand, looking confused. Andreas and I were just discussing his latest venture, he said. Oh, that's wonderful, I said, my smile never wavering. I just had one quick question for him. Andreas, I was just wondering. Have you told your new partner about the 10,000 euros you still owe to Captain Valerios in Crete for that yacht you chartered? Or about the bounced checks you gave to the caterers in Mykonos last summer? The color drained from Andreas's face. The investor's eyes widened, his fork hovering in mid-air. He looked from me to Andreas, then slowly placed his fork down on his plate. Excuse me, the investor said, folding his napkin. I think I have another appointment I've forgotten about. He stood up and walked away, leaving Andreas sitting alone at the table. His perfect illusion shattered in the middle of a crowded cafe. The fallout from my public confrontation at the cafe was immediate. Theron told me that Andreas's potential investor had not only pulled out of the deal but had also started making calls, warning his network about Andreas. The whispers had begun. But the biggest shock was yet to come, and it landed squarely on my parents' doorstep. Few days later my father called me. His voice was trembling with a kind of fear I had never heard from him before. Lyra, the bank called, he stammered. They sent a notice about the olive grove. What kind of notice? I asked, although a cold suspicion was already forming in my mind. A default notice, he said, his voice barely a whisper. On a loan. But you were paying the old loan down. It doesn't make sense. The truth came out in a painful, halting confession. About 2 months ago, Andreas had come to my father with a once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity. He needed a short-term loan to secure a big shipping contract he'd claimed. He promised to pay it back with interest in 60 days. He had flattered my father, praised his business sense, and made him feel important. And my father, blinded by Andreas's charm and desperate to be associated with his supposed success, had co-signed the loan. Andreas had used the family olive grove, our family legacy, as collateral. Of course, the 60 days had passed, and Andreas hadn't paid a cent. The default notice was the bank's first step toward seizing the property. My parents' attempt to squeeze me by cutting me off from the grove had backfired in the most spectacular way possible. In their eagerness to punish me and support Andreas, they had unknowingly handed him the very thing they claimed to cherish. They weren't just bystanders in this mess anymore. They were now fully entangled in Andreas's sticky web of debt, facing the very real possibility of losing everything. The default notice on the olive grove sent my family into a full-blown panic. That night my phone rang. It was Callista. She wasn't screaming this time. She was sobbing, a deep, ragged sound that was almost animal-like. He told me, she choked out between sobs. Dad just told me about the grove. We're going to lose it all, aren't we? It looks that way, I said quietly, feeling no satisfaction, only a profound sense of exhaustion. It was all a lie, Lyra, she cried, and then the confession came pouring out of her, a torrent of ugly truths. All of it. I knew he was in debt. I knew he was in trouble. I didn't think it was this bad. She told me everything. How she had met him a year ago and had been swept away by his promises of a glamorous life. How she had ignored the red flags because she was so desperate to escape her own insecurities. How their entire relationship had been built on creating a perfect image, an Instagram-worthy life that she thought would finally make her happy. I knew he planned to use your money, she admitted, her voice dropping to a shameful whisper. I knew it was wrong, but I was so scared of losing him, of losing the life he promised me. I told myself it was for the family, that his success would be our success. Her sobs grew louder. But now it's all gone. The wedding is gone. Andreas won't even answer my calls. The friends I had, they've all disappeared. They were never my friends. They were his. She took a shuddering breath, and her next words were the most honest thing I had ever heard her say. "I have nothing without this wedding, Lyra. I have nothing without him. I am nothing." In that moment I didn't feel anger. I felt a strange, hollow pity for her. She had chased a beautiful illusion so hard that she had become an illusion herself. And now the illusion was gone and there was nothing left. After Callista's confession, I knew I had reached the end of the line. This was no longer just about protecting my inheritance or getting revenge. This was about stopping a criminal before he could do any more damage. Pitying my sister was one thing. Letting her and her fiancé's actions go unpunished was another. The next morning, I walked into the headquarters of the Economic Crime Division of the Hellenic Police in Athens. The building was imposing and official, a world away from my quiet ceramic studio. Theron was by my side, carrying a laptop and a thick folder. His presence gave me strength. We were taken to a small, sterile office where we met with a detective, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s named Detective Papadakis. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable, as I told her the entire story. I started with the pinprick in the boutique and ended with my father's trembling voice on the phone, telling me about the defaulted loan. I laid it all out. The lies, the manipulation, the emotional blackmail. Then Theron took over. He opened his laptop and the folder, and he began to build the case for her, piece by piece. He showed her the damning email chain, highlighting the key phrases. "Gullible sister's inheritance, and do whatever you have to." He showed her the bank records, the bounced checks, and the paper trail of Andreas's failed businesses. He presented the signed, notarized statements from Captain Valerios and the other scammed vendors. It wasn't just a family sob story anymore. It was a clear, undeniable, and meticulously documented case of fraud, conspiracy, and extortion. Detective Papadakis leaned forward, her eyes now gleaming with professional interest. She looked through the evidence, her expression growing more and more serious. When we were finished, she looked up at me. "Ms. Vetters," she said, her voice firm. "Thank you for coming forward. I believe we have everything we need." The news broke 2 days later. It spread through the elite social circles of Athens like wildfire. Theron sent me the link to the first article from a major Greek news site. The headline was sensational. "Athens entrepreneur arrested in luxury wedding fraud scheme." I clicked on it, my heart pounding. The article detailed how Andreas had been arrested at his gleaming, rented office in the city center. It described his pattern of defrauding small business owners and investors, all while maintaining a lavish lifestyle. And it mentioned, in excruciating detail, the cancelled high society Santorini wedding that had ultimately led to his downfall. But it was the second half of the article that made my stomach drop. Named names. It mentioned the prominent Vetters family and how his fiancée, Callista Vetters, was connected to the case. Suddenly our family name, the name my parents were so obsessed with protecting, was tied to a cheap, embarrassing scandal. Within hours the story was everywhere. It was on gossip sites, in newspapers, and all over social media. They used the perfect smiling photo from Callista's Instagram, the one she had posted while I was getting stitches, as the feature image for their articles. The irony was sickening. Callista's desperate attempt to project an image of perfection had now become the public face of her humiliation. She was no longer the beautiful, enviable bride-to-be. She was the fiancée of a con artist, a social pariah overnight. The world she had worked so hard to build, the world of appearances and status that she had sacrificed our relationship for, had crumbled to dust. Her dream of a perfect life had turned into a very public nightmare. She had gotten her name in the headlines, just not in the way she had ever imagined. With Andreas arrested and the family name in disgrace, my parents were finally forced to face reality. The bank was moving forward with the seizure of the olive grove, and they were powerless to stop it. They had no money, no connections who would help them, and no way out. They were facing total ruin. One evening my father came to my studio. He looked 10 years older. The arrogant pride was gone, replaced by a deep, hollow shame. He didn't make demands or excuses. He simply laid the bank letters on my workbench and said, "We have lost it, Lyra. It's all gone." This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment they would finally need me. But I felt no triumph. I just felt a deep sadness for the legacy my ancestors had built, a legacy that was about to be lost to greed and foolishness. I knew what I had to do. The next day I met with my lawyer. I took the savings I had carefully built up from my ceramics business, my little pottery hobby, and I paid off the immediate crushing debt that Andreas had saddled my father with. I saved the olive grove from foreclosure, but it came with a price. My lawyer drew up a contract. In exchange for clearing the debt, my parents would sign over majority ownership and full operational control of the grove to me. It was not a request. It was a non-negotiable term. They had no choice but to agree. They had lost the right to be stewards of our family's legacy. I had saved it, but it was now mine to protect on my terms. I didn't do it to gloat or to hold it over their heads. I did it to honor my yaya. I was reclaiming the heart of our family, the piece of land that had sustained us for generations. I was finally, truly being the gatekeeper she had asked me to be. A few weeks after Andreas's arrest, Callista showed up at my door one last time. She was a ghost of her former self. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple worn-out jeans and a faded t-shirt. Her hair was unkempt, and her eyes were empty. The vibrant, confident woman who had captivated every room she entered was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out shell. "I have nowhere to go," she said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Everyone has turned their back on me. I need money, Lyra. Just enough to disappear, to go somewhere new and start over where no one knows my name." She was begging. My sister, who had never asked for anything in her life because she believed everything should simply be given to her, was now begging me for a handout. The old Lyra would have written her a check immediately, desperate to ease her pain. But I was not the old Lyra. I knew that giving her money would solve nothing. It would just be a temporary fix, another illusion for her to hide behind. I looked at her, at the wreckage she had made of her life, and I felt a final, weary sense of responsibility. I went to my desk, but I didn't get my checkbook. I came back with two things in my hand. The first was a bus ticket to a quiet, remote village in the Peloponnese, a place where our distant cousins lived, people who valued hard work over social status. The second was the business card of a therapist I knew, a kind woman who specialized in helping people rebuild their lives from the ground up. I held them out to her. "I will not give you money," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "But I will give you a path. This is the last thing you will ever get from me, Callista. I hope you use it well." She stared at the ticket and the card, then slowly took them from my hand. She didn't say thank you. She just turned and walked away. 6 months passed. The scandal faded, as all scandals do, replaced by new headlines and fresh gossip. My life found a new, peaceful rhythm. I poured my energy into my two passions, my pottery and the olive grove. The grove, now free from my father's old-fashioned methods, began to thrive under my sole leadership. I invested in new equipment, perfected our organic farming techniques, and redesigned the packaging. I decided to rebrand our olive oil, to wash away the stain of the scandal and honor the person who had started it all. I called it Yaya Helen's Grove. The name felt right, felt pure. I sent samples to international food competitions and specialty shops in Europe and America. The response was overwhelming. We won a gold medal at a prestigious competition in Italy. Orders started pouring in from restaurants in London and delis in New York. The little family business my parents had nearly lost was now gaining international recognition. My ceramic studio was flourishing too, my new designs inspired by the gnarled ancient olive trees on our land. One afternoon a package arrived for me from Crete. I opened it to find a bottle of the finest, most potent raki I had ever seen. Tucked inside was a simple handwritten note on a piece of blue stationery. It was from Captain Valerios. The note was short, but it meant the world to me. It read, "To Justice. Thank you." I smiled and placed the note on the shelf next to a photo of my yaya. The money from her trust was still sitting in the bank, untouched. I had a feeling I knew what significant family milestone she would want me to use it for now. Investing it back into the land she loved, into the grove that bore her name, ensuring that her legacy would not just be protected, but would grow and flourish for generations to come. The final scene of my strange, painful journey took place on Santorini. I had returned to the island, not as a reluctant maid of honor, but as a business owner. I had a meeting with the manager of a new 5-star boutique hotel. They were interested in exclusively stocking my award-winning Yaya Helen's Grove olive oil in their restaurant and selling my ceramic tableware in their gift shop. The meeting went better than I could have imagined. They loved my products, my story, and they signed a lucrative contract on the spot. After the meeting, I had some time before my ferry back to Athens. I found myself walking along the winding cliffside path, the whitewashed buildings gleaming in the afternoon sun. Without consciously meaning to, I ended up at the very viewpoint where Callista's wedding was supposed to have taken place. I stood there, overlooking the breathtaking caldera, the deep blue of the Aegean Sea stretching out to the horizon. This was the spot that had been the source of so much pain and obsession. It was just as beautiful as the pictures, but it was also just a piece of land. Its power was in the meaning people gave it. The sun began to set, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange, pink, and gold. There was no wedding. There was no champagne, no fake smiles, no desperate need to capture the perfect photo. There was only the sound of the wind, the distant cry of a seagull, and a quiet, powerful sense of peace that settled deep within my soul. I hadn't just destroyed a wedding with a single click. I had dismantled a tower of lies. I had saved my family's legacy, exposed a criminal, and in the process I had finally, truly found myself. I was exactly where I was meant to be, alone on a cliff in Santorini, watching the sunset, whole and free.